technical difficulties. I'm here with Alyson Richmond and Shaunna Edwards, and I'm so thrilled to be kicking off Historical Happy Hours this fall with these wonderful authors and their book, The Thread Collectors. It's a Civil War novel, which I tell you is just amazing, and I'm so excited to talk about it tonight. I've so many questions. We could be here for hours, but we'll keep it to 45 like usual. I'm going to start by introducing the authors. Alyson Richmond is the #1 internationally best-selling author of several historical novels, including The Velvet Hours, The Garden of Letters, and The Lost Wife, which is currently in development for a major motion picture. Amazing. Her novels have been published in 25 languages. She's a graduate of Wellesley College and lives on Long Island with her husband and 2 children. Shaunna J. Edwards has a BA in Literature from Harvard College and a JD from NYU School of Law. A former corporate lawyer, she now works in diversity, equity, and inclusion. She's a native Louisianan, raised in New Orleans, and currently lives in Harlem with her husband. The Thread Collectors is her first novel. Congratulations. Welcome, ladies. The Thread Collectors is about Stella, a young Black woman enslaved in New Orleans, and Lily, a Jewish woman from New York City who both risk everything for love and freedom during the Civil War. But I'll tell you, like, that doesn't even begin to describe the story, because it's also told from the perspectives of the men that they love, William and Jacob. So I'm going to dive in with questions and let you both talk about it. So you've been friends for over a decade, is that right, or about a decade?
That's right. No, I think something like 13 years.
Amazing. So this is the first time you've collaborated on a novel. So tell me about the origins of the novel and the spark that made you go from friends to co-authors.
So who should go first?
Alyson, you go.
I'm gonna go first. So Shaunna and I met, of all places, in Las Vegas. So it's actually even more funny if you knew me more intimately, because I'm someone who usually goes to bed at 9 o'clock, is in my pajamas at 4 p.m. and has chamomile tea. So it's not your typical Las Vegas girl.
And as you can tell from my wine, I'm a Las Vegas girl.
So I am married to a corporate lawyer, and Shaunna is a former corporate lawyer herself. At the time we met 13 years ago, though, she was in the full swing of being an attorney. And I had just, well, not just, but my daughter, who's now 16, she had just been potty trained, and we were invited to this corporate lawyers conference in Las Vegas. And I was so desperate to get out of the house and have some, alone time with my husband, that I went to this conference. And so I was at the conference, and there was a big reception, and I was standing in line at the bar wearing a pretty dress, because I love dresses, and I was letting every man cut in front of me. And all of a sudden, this beautiful woman from the corner of the room comes storming over and says, "Why are you letting every man cut in front of you at the bar? And by the way, I love your dress." And so she quickly navigated the crowd, got me a cocktail, and then started asking me questions. And, the way, if Shaunna were telling it, she would say, "I didn't think she was an attorney, but I didn't want, I wasn't sure." So I asked Alyson what she did, and I said that I was a writer. And Shaunna's eyes completely popped open. They just sort of alighted with this, beautiful spark of energy. And she, started to tell me that she had majored in English literature in college, that she loved to read, that she always dreamt of being a novelist. And right away, from that moment that we met in Las Vegas, our friendship was sort of cemented on our mutual love of books. So over the course of a decade, before we even started dreaming of what would become the Thread Collectors, every time I would see Shaunna, we would talk about books. She would ask me what I was writing. She invited me to her book club. If I was sick, she sent me books. So it was something that, we can talk about how we came to write the novel in 2020. But from the moment we met, the foundation of our friendship was books, against the backdrop of Las Vegas, which is crazy. So luckily, as Shaunna always says, this time what happened in Vegas did not just stay in Vegas.
Excellent. Nice. And actually, so Shaunna, if you want to elaborate, because I was really fascinated by the fact that this story weaves in both of your family histories. So, talk to me about how you both decided one day to weave these family histories into a novel.
We did, but it wasn't a one-day decision, Jane. It was on one of those times that Alyson and I were getting together. I think once again, it was over drinks. in 2017, and I asked her what she was working on. She mentioned she had just seen this documentary, and I'm sorry, I'm getting bad feedback. Hopefully it's not me. Okay. She mentioned that she had just seen this documentary from the Civil War. It's called Death in the Civil War, I believe, by the fabulous documentarian Rick Burns. And she had been fascinated to learn something that I think I had always known, that Black men in the Civil War were not immediately issued rifles and set off to fight for their freedom. They were often given pickaxes, hoes, shovels. They were forced labor for the Union Army. And that same documentary also talked about the fact that because so many people died so quickly in the Civil War, bodies had to be buried very quickly. Usually that fell to the Black men to do. And comrades, they would write these small little rudimentary maps with the hope that they would give them to people's loved ones so that they could go to these different battlefields and find their loved ones. And so Alyson, and she'll tell you why maybe a little bit later, why she's fascinated by the Civil War. She had had this idea and she was explaining it to me where maybe there was an unexpected friendship between a Black soldier and a white soldier on a battlefield, and then the Black soldier creates a map for the white soldier's widow to find. And I said pretty immediately, because obviously I am keenly interested in seeing representation in literature and telling Black stories. Well, wouldn't it be interesting if this Black soldier gave this map to his beloved and she used needle and thread and created something permanent? And for me, I come from a family where we're privileged enough to like have quilts that have my grandmother's dresses in it, my great grandmother's dresses.
Wow.
My parents grew up relatively poor, but in a family that was full of both of the families that were full of like resources. They didn't throw things away; they would use them. And so for me, that idea of taking something, a scrap, and making it something beautiful and more permanent was really resonant. And also, who doesn't love a good love story? I mean, I don't know that I've ever really admitted this to Alyson. Like, I read bodice rippers, right? Like, you could clearly come into my apartment on a Saturday and I'm reading like Love in the Desert. So I
Nice.
always love a good love story too. So that was going on in my head.
You did confide with me about that. But it's funny, I guess when you're collaborating on a book with someone, right away we were like, we're gonna have a closed door sort of like attitude.
Yeah. But you know, Alyson's so fancy. My taste in fiction are much, much broader. So for me, a love story made a lot of sense. But you know, we didn't start writing this book in 2017. We didn't start writing it until 2020. But that was the germ of the idea that we had always been exchanging ideas. And when Alyson brought me her idea, and then I layered on the top of what we could explore with Black history, it had to sit there and germinate for a while.
Yeah, as a lot of great ideas do, I think, right? It takes some time. Someone in the audience said, Shaunna, they're hearing a little feedback on yours. I don't know if do you have two Zooms open maybe, or?
Oh goodness, am I, like, one thing you should also know about me, I am a total Luddite.
Oh no.
I am too.
And it's been a while. Like everyone's sick of Zoom. I haven't been on Zoom for a while, so tonight I had Charlie, my husband, standing in the wings just to make sure.
It would be funny that you had trouble getting on if you were on twice. And you
Is this much better?
Yes.
That is better. Yeah,
Okay.
that's great.
Sorry about that, y'all.
Okay.
No, no
We can
worries.
still hear you, but make it easier now.
So, okay, and I'll put this on Do Not Disturb. Excuse me. So Shaunna, you told your part of like the history of your family, and if you want to share, Alyson, your history, your side of the history, which is so interesting as well.
So growing up from my grandmother, I used to hear, my grandmother, first of all, was a wonderful storyteller, and loved to talk about, her connection with her heirlooms and her family history. I am 100% Jewish, but one of the things that's a little bit unique about my family history is that on my mother's side, her ancestors came over to America in the 1850s. And so according to my grandmother, during the Civil War, one of my great uncles went down to Mississippi to expand his mercantile business, while his younger brother Jacob remained in New York and enlisted in the Union Army as a musician. But the one in Mississippi enlisted in the Confederacy. So we have two brothers basically in our family tree that fought on opposite sides it was always particularly interesting to me, not just the sense of this fraternal divide, because according to my grandmother, it permanently divided our family forever. We lost contact with the
Wow.
southern branch of the family because of this philosophical and moral divide. But also this, if you put it in context, that they themselves were, immigrants, first, in this case, first generations, the boys who were born in America, and how they, you know, how they aligned themselves on the sides of the Civil War, one, fighting for freedom and the other one clearly not. So I always wanted to put that in a book somehow. I didn't, and I always tell Shaunna that I have tons of ideas in a book, for books in my head. I don't drive on highways. I think it's because my head is so crowded. I've now learned that Shaunna doesn't either, so that obviously is a sign. I think there are two signs to knowing you're a natural novelist. You're bad at technology and you drive on highways.
Oh, and you're meant to be friends, right?
Okay, great. I have to ask you, Jane, do you drive on highways?
I do drive on highways.
Oh, you're an advanced novelist. But but in order to sit down and write a novel, at least for me, you have to feel that it's in your bones the right time. There's something in the air that is making it so that this is the clear pathway, that this is what you're going to devote yourself. It's a marathon. It's completely all consuming. And so everything in the air and in your mind has to feel like this is what I want to commit myself to. So even though Shaunna and I had this early conversation about possibly, about this documentary I saw that was very interesting, that I could see a possible Civil War book, and I also had this German idea of incorporating my family history, it did not seem like it was the right time for me to write it. And I think it's because I needed Shaunna. Like, I feel like when, we can talk about this a little bit later, but in 2020, when the world reckons, was reckoning with the racial violence of, seeing the cold-blooded murder of George Floyd on television and realizing that this was the time that no one could be silent at the outrage of this, that I felt like this was something that I wanted to devote myself to, a book in which, we looked at the Civil War through two underrepresented lenses, one Black, one Jewish, and tried to bring our hearts and our soul to writing this book. And so that's when I reached out to Shaunna, not knowing if, because Shaunna has a full-time job, would she even want to write a book? But I knew also that she had already contributed in some way to this idea with the maps and the textiles and bringing her family history when we were talking about it. And so I reached out to ask her if that might be something, and again, we were in the throes of the pandemic, if it might be something that she wanted to embark on with me, together.
Now, Shaunna, were you immediately like, yes, absolutely, or did you have to think about it?
Oh, heck no. I mean, Alyson is lovely and we are deep friends, but she noted, like, 2020, I'm sorry, there's so much feedback and I can't figure out why.
It was good before.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully it will.
That's good.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
But it still has feedback, no? I'm still hearing it.
I'm sorry. Well, as I said, like, imagine in 2020, if you're sitting around and you're a woman of color and your white girlfriend calls you and she says, do you want to write a book about race? I mean, I don't know too many people who their first instinct is going to be absolutely yes. So I had to think about it, even though I know that Alyson is wonderful and we have such a great relationship. I didn't know if I could sit in the emotion of it, because you're living in a very divisive time racially from a social justice perspective, and then you have to go and research and first person accounts, and in my case standing on battlefields where Black people died, talking about the Civil War. So it was not an immediate yes for me. And I think even for the first, month or two of writing, I was still really tentative, right? I was all into it intellectually, but my heart, there was something in there. I was waiting a little bit to be sure that I wouldn't be hurt.
Yeah, I understand that. Because and I have a question about this we'll get to later, but I mean, it's not always an easy read. It's war, right? And there's a lot of heart-wrenching scenes and things that take place. So the title of the novel is The Thread Collectors. Both Stella and Lily, use sewing to aid the war efforts in different ways. But also I was really moved by the fact that hand sewn items were such a huge expression of love. And this isn't a spoiler scene because it happens pretty early on in the book, but Stella, who was basically bought by a white man and put up in a cottage in New Orleans as a kept woman. When she first moves into the cottage and she's so nervous and she's only 18, and she walks into the bedroom and there's a quilt that was made by her mother and her sister and all the women in the community. I'm like getting a little choked up right now, like, and it's all pieces of materials from their dresses and from their lives, and that was something that they did to protect and love her. And that was really moving. And so what is it in your family histories, and you mentioned it a little bit with the maps, that made you decide that sewing was going to be central to the story?
Well, so I think originally that just the idea that there was a woman who was gifted with her needle and thread, we knew that we had to carry that through. And we knew that William and Jacob share a really creative passion, right? They are both gifted musicians. And we had to connect Stella and Lily in some ways, even though, and I don't think this is a spoiler, they don't meet right away. And so sewing definitely seemed to be the case. And the coverlet that Stella gets, and Stella is named after my mother, Stella. All of the women in the book are named after women in my family tree.
Nice.
That is really reminiscent of all of the quilts and the textiles that my mother has salvaged from my family, right? Like Alyson's been in my bathroom. Even here in Harlem, I live in a small little New York apartment. I don't have a full quilt, but I have a piece of a quilt that hangs in my bathroom, and it is from my female ancestors' dresses. And when I wake up in the morning and I'm putting on my armor for the day, I look at that and I see where I came from. And it's just little strips. You can tell that it was either like an offcut or something from a hymn, or they're not even evenly done. It was true remnants, but I feel so much closer to them. And we wanted Stella to have that feeling at a time of really great hardship, thinking about what she's walking into.
I'm trying to see if I can get rid of the feedback, because I'm seeing that I have feedback too, according to people in the chat. Is this better?
I don't hear yours. I hear yours, Shaunna, a little bit. Alyson, yours seems a little better to me, but
okay.
I can hear you both clearly though. There's just the feedback's not too bad. It's not too like echoey to me. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, we'll make it through.
I mean, one thing I giggled when you asked about the sewing a little bit, because Shaunna and I, because we approached this project tentatively, and it was her first writing collaboration. Actually, it was one of my first collaborations too. We wrote 40 pages and sent it to my agent to see, like, does this seem like something that, will be of interest, something that is sellable? Because I didn't want Shaunna to waste her time and write an entire manuscript and then it wasn't going to sell. And in those 40 pages was that scene with the quilt that is sewn by all the women of Rampart Street. And it was, our agent and then also the editor who bought the book on those 40 pages who said, this is really interesting. This would be an interesting way to connect the two women. Because Shaunna and I very much so wanted to tell the story of the men. I mean, I love that when you were introducing us, you said it's not just about the women, it's about the men. And Jane, you're a historical fiction novelist. You know how much pressure we have as historical novelists, that we're told by publishing houses, it's the women who buy historical fiction. It's the women's stories that, are the ones that sell. Even in a title, it's a tremendous fight not to have women, girls, sisters,
ladies, wives.
Yeah, and so we had to navigate that, because it was important to have, the men were the genesis of how we even came up with this idea. And so we wanted to make sure we didn't lose the story of the men, but we also wanted to respect that women's stories are important and bring their story too. So then it became a story not just of two people, but of 4 different perspectives, which is, makes it incredibly ambitious to be able to weave them all together.
Very. Like, cheers to you.
But luckily we had 2 brains working on it, 2 researchers working on it. you know, two husbands that were working, you know, reading all of our versions, and they're very smart.
Right.
So they, you know, were weighing in. So it worked out. But I want to be, you know, forthcoming and say that, because I know you're in the business, and I think it's something that readers sometimes don't realize, that we often want to write as men's stories as well, but we have to push for that. And I love now reading on Goodreads and seeing, like, this also gave the male perspective. Like, it is something unique, I think, from other books that are out there.
That'll come back.
Okay.
Good. Phew. All right. This is just one of those nights, ladies. We're just winging
Okay.
it.
And there was one attendee that said, "Is there a TV on?" I actually went off camera to check that there's no ghost in here because I'm alone. I don't have a TV on. I think it's that kind of thing.
That kind of thing. Yeah. So this is the question that I had brought up earlier. So one of the things you say in the author's notes is, we wanted to explore the Civil War experience through two underrepresented lenses and illuminate the important and often overlooked tragedies of the era, like the auctioning off of light-skinned Black women, like the massacre. I at Port, I just blanked on it.
Port Hudson.
Yeah, Port Hudson, and I have to tell you, like, there were those scenes. They were very difficult to read, and but so important to the story and so important to illuminate, like you said. So did you have a difficult time writing them? Sometimes did you get really emotional writing them? Because I could feel it. I could really feel the emotion in those scenes.
So yes, and in Port Hudson in particular, because it's the height of the pandemic, so a lot of the research we had to do online. But because my family lives in New Orleans, I would go down and, you know, go to places like the historic New Orleans collection. I went to Port Hudson and I brought my husband. At the time, I don't know that he was my husband. I'm surprised he didn't run away. And we spent a day with the park ranger and we stood out. And I thought about that, right? I thought about this having happened just an hour and a half from my home, and me having had a good education and not knowing that hundreds of Black men died there, and to think that their bodies
Yeah.
lay there for weeks. So it was incredibly difficult sometimes to read the history, the first person accounts. And there is one particular scene in the book, I don't want to give a spoiler alert, but I wanted to make sure that people understood that the Black experience at the time wasn't singular, that there were free Black people, and what happens to the free Black people in the book definitely gutted me. You know, it took me time.
Yeah, yeah, I can understand why. It was really heavy, but you handled it so beautifully. Like, it was written beautifully. So, I was, yeah, and I felt the emotion, like I said. Which actually brings me to the next questions. Like, there's certain books, and this is one of them, that felt very cinematic, like sweeping and cinematic to me. Part of it was because I listened and read at the same time because I wanted to get it done before the webinar. And then narrator is excellent. If you could give her a shout out, I'm blanking on her name right now.
Her name is Robin Miles, and I actually saw yesterday that she got a audio file award for our audio rendition. So everyone is really happy with
amazing.
Her performance. So that's wonderful. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
So it has this very movie-like feel, and I'm just wondering, have you been approached for anything, if you can talk about it, any sort of movie?
We do have a film agent. She literally just went out with it maybe 3 days ago to
different exciting
production companies. So we will, keep our fingers crossed. We certainly didn't write it sitting there like, we're going to make this into a movie. But I think the style in which we write, it's very visual.
Yes.
I don't know if I should jump ahead and say this, but people always want to know, did Shaunna and I take chapters that we wrote, separately? Did she write the Black characters and I wrote the Jewish characters? And just, to answer that, absolutely no. We decided we were going to write this book with one seamless voice. We brainstormed every chapter. I would take a first pass and kind of do broad strokes, and she would go in and build with more strokes, and then I would come in, and it was like, we describe it as sort of if a sculptor had a wire armature that we were constantly putting layers of clay on the story. And Shaunna's mother owns and founded a gallery in New Orleans called Stella Jones Gallery, which was, the first African American focused, am I saying this right, gallery in New Orleans, correct me?
Fine art focused gallery in New Orleans, yes.
So not only does her family have a very rich tradition in quilting and textiles, but her, with art in general. And so I think the way we see the world, the way we see those chapters unfurling are very visual. They're very sensory rich because we both see the world that way. I'm the daughter of an abstract painter. I wanted to be a painter myself before I started writing. So that visual lens that we tried to make you see everything, make you feel that you were walking in the footsteps of a soldier on Port Hudson, that you could smell everything, you could feel the texture of the uniforms or the earth beneath their feet. That was very important to us. So I think that's why it has a cinematic feel, perhaps more than other stories, which are just plot driven to tell you what's happening. We wanted to bring the five senses into the writing.
Yes, yeah, and you completely did. And that actually, I wanted to talk we have a lot of writers who listen in and watch. I wanted to talk about process. So you started to talk about it. So did you map this out? Are you, they would talk about plotters versus pantsers. What was your process?
I just want to say, because I don't know if Shaunna understands the pantster.
Kind of, like seat of the pants and everything is laid out.
Right.
We definitely are the type of, and I'm this way with all my books, and luckily Shaunna is aligned with this. We never advanced to the next chapter till we were really satisfied with the chapter that we had just written. So there was a constant refinement of going over and making sure it was perfect. And we, Shaunna, you can talk about how we plotted out the other part of the book.
So we would, when we sat down on that first writing day in person, which actually was Juneteenth, we kind of knew where we wanted the story to go. We might not have known how all of the four characters would navigate the time in between, but we knew the broad strokes. And then we committed to every weekend, we would brainstorm the chapters. We would know what was going to happen. So it really did feel like we were creating, we were building. And there would be points and times where, something unexpected, we would think about it. In the beginning, I certainly gave my context, my cultural context, and then Alyson gave her cultural context. But the beauty, Jane, was I would say about a third of the way through, we started to feel confident enough to suggest something from someone else's heritage, right? At first, Alyson was very hesitant, completely understandable, to do anything related to Southern dialect, and particularly related to Black Southern dialect, right? She would leave a little note. We worked on a Google Docs, and she would say, we need to have a conversation here. What do you think? And then I would say, well, maybe we're going to frame it out like this. And she laughed. She said, she's like, do you want to touch anything dealing with Black hair? Right? I guess she's read enough. She's like, I'm not touching it. But over time, as we shared more about ourselves and understood our characters more, we were able to be braver and just like dive in. So there are some aspects that you might even see from the Jewish heritage that like might come out of my brain, and the same thing with Alyson.
Amazing. Because when I first read the book, and I was thinking that you kind of divvied up chapters based on who was going to, okay, you write William's perspective, you write Lily's perspective, and I find it amazing that you wrote it together that way. That's really interesting and
I think
impressive.
It would have been too disjointed if we had done it that way. Unless you had written it in first person and you had two distinct voices. I think if you had it in third person and had different perspectives writing it, it wouldn't have worked in my gut. And this was actually wonderful because it brought Shaunna and I together, that we needed to be one seamless voice, one beating heart, one mind, and well, maybe two minds, but like, we're that merging of our friendship, that bridge that we wanted to bring between William and Jacob and Lily and Stella. It's happening with us too. Our friendship was deepening, and in the case with William and Jacob, music is that thread that binds, that language that transcends different race and religion. For us, it was the same with this book. The language of the storytelling was something that connected us and brought us closer together.
Wonderful. I'm going to ask a couple more questions, and then if people have questions, you can put them in the chat and the Q&A, and I'll check both. So, what was the hardest part of writing this book, and what was the easiest part of writing this book, would you say?
So the hardest part for me was not, I mean, I want to be really honest, so I'm going to say, like, for me, it was really pushing to make sure that we could write a historical novel that did go dark, you know, because there is this pressure to make a book that is commercial and sellable. But the reason we came together was because we saw this as a legacy, project. We wanted to leave something of 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 substantial weight behind, that did illuminate these periods of history like Port Hudson or the burning of the Colored Orphan Asylum in New York, which no one knows about. These different episodes that we felt we want to sweep you away in a good story, that you love our characters and you're rooting for them, but also when you finish the last page, you've learned something. And that also included using difficult language sometimes, and I think there is a tremendous fear in publishing that if you have too many triggers, it could affect the commercial appeal of a book. And
Right.
So we had to weigh that, and we had to listen to our editor, and we understood her concerns, but we also felt a united front that we weren't going to make racist people, whether they were in New York or in the South, talk like gentlemen, and so
right yeah
people. So we wanted to make this historically factual and be something that we were really proud of.
So for me, I think because this is my first time embarking on something of this length, knowing what to highlight in the research, I found so many fascinating things that I would love to share with the world. But obviously, it's not a textbook, right? It's a novel. So how do you choose back and forth when I wish everyone understood the breadth and depth of the Black experience, not only during the Civil War, but generally in America and the world beyond? So that was somewhat difficult, but Alyson is a wonderful guide, and we came to decisions. I would say the easiest thing is I have a knack for decisions, and it was nice that translated very well. One of the things Alyson has told me sometimes as a writer, it can be a very solitary process, right? Like you have people, your fellow writers to go to, you can be supported, but at the end of the day, you have to make a decision about what's going to happen. And I find that, and Alyson can tell me whether it's true or not, I find that's not that hard for me. Alyson would sometimes be musing on things, and she would call me.
She said that, yeah.
And I'd be like in between meetings, and I'd be like, I have 3 minutes, what's up? And she would talk to me, and I'd be like, no, it's easy. And so the ability to know that I have that knack was very good.
Excellent. Oh, both great answers. And so, again, there's a lot of writers on here. What is the best advice you have for new writers? As Shaunna, your debut, Alyson, you've been at this for a while. What's your best piece of advice for writers who are trying to break in, trying to get published? What would you say?
So I would say, you have to be courageous and you have to stick to your dream. It does require a tremendous amount of dedication. I always tell budding writers, it's not the quantity that you do every day, but it's that you write every day. So even if you're going to say to yourself, I'm going to write a paragraph every day, and it will add up. I tried to, with this book, try and write 1,000 words a day. And so that, there would always be something in that wheel we were discussing, and I could write to Shaunna and say, okay, in the Google Doc, there's, 3 new pages. And she'd say, I'm going to get to it on Friday and I'll have it to you by Sunday. And then on Sunday night, we would talk about what was happening next. And just keeping it moving so it was never static. I think that would be my advice to budding writers.
That's really good advice. How about you, Shaunna?
I mean, go to Vegas and make friends with I don't know.
As you do.
One thing I think I should say, I approach this whole process and I approach what is happening now for us and the response the book is receiving with complete humility. I mean, this is inspiration and work of love, but I also recognize that Alyson had to have tremendous faith in me to reach out and embark upon this project with me. And so I just want to be, once again, completely honest during happy hour about that. I recognize.
Excellent. So what are you working on next? And are you working on a sequel? Because I read in an article that you might be working on a sequel to the Thread Collectors. Or can you not talk about it yet?
No, that's our dream to do this as a series. I mean, we really want to take the characters and not only continue their story. I mean, we did not, for those of you who finished it, we don't wrap everything up in a neat bow. In general, I never do that with my books, not because I anticipate a series like I do with this one or wanting to do a series, but I also love the fact that it makes an ending not finite, that the reader can start to imagine what the next journey will be. It's almost like you answer the immediate questions of what the book was about and have resolution, but they're at a portal where a new beginning is happening. And so what Shaunna and I are hoping is that we can take the characters and bring them into Reconstruction, then possibly the Harlem Renaissance, the Civil Rights, their progeny, continuing against different backdrops of history and using two underrepresented lenses to see that, and also strengthening the friendships between these two families over the course of history. And also the thread of music, that the talent will be passed down to, through their children, and what happens with those musicians through history.
Yes.
Yeah. And also the joy. I mean, of course, this is a very difficult time, but there is joy in our book. There is sisterly bonding, right? Like there is light, just as there is in all of our lives, even when things that we are living through happen to be difficult. I saw something in the chat, like, is it very dark and depressing? It's life, I think
it's war. Yeah.
It's war, and it's against war, but there is certainly joy and hope.
Absolutely.
And love. There's so much love.
Yes. Yeah.
And you're rooting for these characters to be able to love and to survive and to triumph.
Yes,
but at the same time, it is against the backdrop of a very, one of the darkest periods of the American history, and it would be wrong not to show that. But again, light pierces through the darkness. I
completely agree. I saw that question as well. I think that it is the Civil War. But I think that you balance darkness with light, and I feel like I felt hopeful throughout it, even in the darker parts of the story. So I think it's a great book club pick. And this is my last question, and then I'm gonna take some questions that I see in the chat. What's the best way for readers to keep in touch with you and find out about events and new projects? Do you do virtual book clubs? That's it's kind of two questions in one, but.
So we both are on social media, though we're kind of like, I don't know, we're trying to learn how to really, do it with finesse. But I'm on Instagram at Alyson Richman, ALYSONRICHMAN, and also on Facebook on Alyson Richman -author. All of our events are listed on our events page at thethreadcollectors.com. We're going to be posting our in-person events on social media in different sort of shareables, and then also our virtual events like you also will be doing that. So there's lots of ways to communicate with us. And if your book club is interested in having a personal meeting, we're hoping to be able to do that in 2023. Our schedule right now is pretty.
Oh yeah, it looks pretty packed.
Yeah, it's pretty packed. But we're very grateful, and obviously we're going to do a lot of other virtual events that if you do read the book and you want to do a different type of talk, there'll be lots of things out there.
For sure.
And for me, my Instagram is Shaunna J. Edwards. And then social media. Facebook, I'm at Shaunna J. Edwards. There you go.
Perfect. Excellent. So Christine Mott, who is, I don't think she's missed a webinar. She's like the best person and fan and reader. And she asks, this is actually one of my backup questions. The cover is gorgeous. Love the cover. It's so unique. And did you have much input? Because I know some publishers you don't have a lot of input, and others you do. So.
So we did, and it's interesting though. Originally, and I'm sorry, my feedback is so bad. But when Alyson mentioned we originally wanted the men to be really, really central, I had always envisioned like maybe not two men holding rifles, but something more artistic with two men and maybe facing each other and holding caps. But it was decided that we needed to focus on the women. And the way it turned out, I really love it. We gave them
Love it.
historical photographs. Stella's wearing what is called a traditional tignon, which is something that in Louisiana they use to cover their hair. We really focused on the colors of the dresses. The one thing that I did have, I don't want to say back and forth about, but I was pretty adamant about is I did not want Stella to be so fair as to almost appear white. Because it's important for me when I go into a bookstore, like I buy from this about the story, but I also buy on the cover, and I want to see if I'm going to resonate with someone in there. And I wanted Black women and women of color to also feel like the story could resonate with.
Yeah. And someone asked, could you hold up the cover up close so you can get a better look at it? That would be.
So,
Yes.
they surprised us because they made the letters in high relief in silver foil, and then they put gloss of the lace over the women's dresses. So they did such a wonderful job doing that. And when they told us they were having actresses in the historical dress, I think Shaunna and I were like, oh my God, is this going to become like, you know, not look elegant? But they did such a wonderful job, and they did let us collaborate. I mean, we even said, like, you know, originally Lily's dress was green. It was like a bright jade green. And we showed them right away, both of us showed the image to our mothers who are artistic, and both of our mothers loved the green. But I felt, Lily, and I think Shaunna too, that it should be blue. There's a lot of blue in our book.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
and we wanted her dress to be blue. And so they worked with us to get just the right, it's almost like a teal, and so it would pop. So we're really thrilled how it came out.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, I just loved it, and I'm obsessed with covers because I'm in this business, and I'm like, and it's unique too, which sometimes, you know, there's a lot of the same out there. They did a really good job.
Yeah.
Okay, so last question, I'll wrap it up because a couple people asked this. Was The Thread Collectors the original title of the book? No. Do you want to, can you share what it was?
It was called The Blue Queen. The proposal we sold the book on was the blue chords, because we thought we were so clever with the chords of music and then the chords of the thread.
Yeah.
But you know, you've been in the business long enough to know that wasn't going to be the title they were taking.
Yeah, that just happened to me too. They're like, yeah, so here's some other titles that we like better.
I mean, we did not, I mean, come up with the title until like the book was finished. Like, finished.
We
like,
went through hundreds of
and everything.
Really? Oh, wow.
But I'm glad that our publisher like pushed for us to find something that we were all happy, that they felt happy, that we felt happy. We, you know, we did come to, you know, a moment where we're like, the thread collectors, that's good, because it doesn't just, you know, connect with the women, but you can think of the threads of the men's uniforms, you know, that they were, you know, proud to be wearing this Union blue, and you know, and the threads that bind us as, you know, humans and between the men. Like it was a title that I think we all are proud of.
Yeah, and has multi layers, like you said. It works.
Because the book does deal with the men, so to have something with women, sisters, girls, and wives. I mean, I have books myself that have those titles. It would have diminished the men's parts and their spirits in the book, and so we're glad that everyone, you know, came to see that being important to us.
Yeah, completely agree. This was delightful. I apologize for the technical issues. It was really nice
for having us.
Yeah, so great. Everyone, The Thread Collectors, I highly recommend on audio or print or Kindle, wherever books are sold. And best of luck, and keep us posted about new projects too. I'd love to have you on again.
Thank you, James.
All right. Good night, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.